A man wearing dark glasses stands in front of a crowded room. Behind him is a slideshow presentation.
That's on my first slide. Oh, I'm definitely mic'd. All right. Good morning, everyone. My name is Cory Joseph. The title of this talk is Machine versus User, Designing an Inclusive Experience. And I was asked to come this morning and talk about the screen reader user experience as a follow-on to what the people from Facebook just went through. And I kind of went off the rails a little, hopefully they forgive me, but what we're gonna go through is actually the design thinking and the mental model you should be taking into consideration as you build out your designs. And everything I go through is one-to-one impactful for screen reader users, but it'll actually affect many, many different kinds of users. And that's what I hope that you take away from today. So when we talk about machine versus user, what I'm talking about here is the fact that user experience is not skin deep. It is not just about the way it visually appears. It's about designing for inclusion from the very beginning. If we don't design for inclusion from the very beginning, we're innately going to exclude people. And we need to change some of our thinking about how the, quote, machine plays a role in our user experience. All right, so a little bit about me. My name's Cory Joseph. I've lived in the Pac Northwest for 11 years. I was born in Cleveland, Ohio. It's a great place to be from. I am a user experience engineer at Microsoft. I've been there for a few years now. I've been working on UX engineer type work, front-end development, UX design work for a little over 5 years. Before that, I worked on digital marketing at a large company in Portland. Beyond that, some of my likes, I like photography. I like a thing called Electro Swing, if you know what it is, bourbon, good coffee, and some design topics. And yes, the dog is ridiculously cute. Her name is Vine. She's 8 years old. She's a black Labrador. Beyond that, if you want to get a hold of me, my email address is cory.joseph@microsoft.com or CoryJ206 on Twitter, or just Cory Joseph, all one word, on LinkedIn. And these slides, just so you know, they're already available. They're up. You can go download them at coryj627.github.io/uw-a11y-masterclass. I know, it's a ridiculously long URL. I didn't have an easy way to make it shorter at the time. But that's where the slides live, and you can go get the content right now, if that will help. All right, so now this next slide, I have a picture of a wooden chair, and that chair has been, it appears to have been designed for 4 legs in its shape, but it's missing one. It only has 3 legs. And this chair was purposefully designed this way. This chair was designed as an art piece. And this is where we need to separate art from design. Design is art with constraints, with user needs and user impact. And one thing to keep in mind as we go through all this, don't let your sense of expression get in the way of meeting the needs of your users. All right, and when we talk about the needs of our users, there's actually some basic questions that we all ask anytime we encounter a piece of technology, a digital user interface of any kind. And it's a methodology of thinking that I'm pulling from a worldwide consortium of accessibility guidelines called POUR. Can I perceive it? Can I operate it? Can I understand it? And is it robust enough for me to bring my own way of using it? And regardless of our physical abilities or mental abilities, et cetera, we all ask these questions. We all ask, all right, do I get what this thing's gonna do? What is it gonna do? Do I understand what happens? Can I get out of it if I need to? And, oh, well, if we're talking about a grocery store automated cashier system, can I use my card? Can I use cash? Can I use Apple Pay, Google Pay? Can I bring my tools to the field? And this is the kind of user expectations we all have. Now, when we take a step from the other end of the fence, the machine, the technology, only asks a few questions when it's building out this visual interface. What is this thing? What does it do? And does it contain any information or have special attributes? When we talk about object-oriented development, these are some of the basic questions we talk about when we describe an object. And this is how our machines, our technology, the computer are thinking about everything we look at every day. So let's take an example. I have a simple web form on the slide right now. It is visually designed in a way that it has clean visual hierarchy. There's clear headings, one for personal information and one for favorite toppings. There's a grouping of checkboxes that are large and extra bold with a check mark on one of them that's extra large and extra bold. And the labels for the fields for personal information are above the input boxes instead of to the left that you would have by default. Then we have a clear call to action with big, bold text that says submit, and it's surrounded by blue, and a grayed out cancel button as a secondary option. This is all visual hierarchy. This is all what we kind of perceive from a user interface immediately. These are snap interpretations. But to the technology stack, to this case, a web form, what does the computer see? And I'm going to show you some code, and if you don't work in code at all, don't worry, we're not actually going to spend a lot of time there. It's just to make a point. So this next slide is the HTML code. And it's actually, outside of probably being an eye chart on the slide, it is pretty human readable. You can figure out, hey, this is a grouping of the text boxes. This is where you have the stuff for the check boxes, and you're calling out what everything's called. And this is the first part of the equation, right? What is this and what does it do? Then the next bit of code is all the styling guidelines and rules to make that web form not look like the default experience and have that increased visual hierarchy and be more easily understood and have a clear call to action. This is all the code called CSS that is implemented to make that form have that appearance. So now we have visually, what is this and what does it do? And we have the understanding that the visual hierarchy of that form. Taking a step forward, though, what does the machine actually see? When we, as users, go to interact with it, especially from a screen reader perspective, what is the machine telling us about that experience? And now what we have on the slide is a mapping of what's called the accessibility tree. This is a programmatically created model that if you're using a device that has a user interface and runs on a modern operating system like Windows, Android, iOS, etc., or even Linux, this is always being created for everything you interact with and everything that you could possibly see. The system is trying to create this object model, this tree of information that is what assistive technologies, whether that's a screen reader, a voice control system, or an alternative input mechanism like gaze control or eye control, or different forms of joysticks and different types of keyboards. This is the layer of the computer that all those tools actually interact with. And it's much simpler than the code that I just showed. It's very clear. Okay, we have checkbox, here's the name, here's the label, here's a group, here's a navigation area, here's a button with a name, a button with a name. Very, very simple information is conveyed through this. We can actually go one more step in and magnify on one of the checkboxes. Don't hate me for liking pineapple on my pizza, but that's what we have. We on the left side of this, or on my right side of the screen, we have a checked box for pineapple, very large. And then on the other side of the screen, we have all the varying properties that the accessibility tree pulls out of that single checkbox. First of all, okay, it's a control, it's a checkbox, and that's why we see checkbox with that number, and that number connects to a Windows way of looking at control types. Then we have different attributes or elements of that checkbox. Does it have any other roles? Is it a scrollable pattern? Is it a toggle pattern? Is it a text child of a different element? And these are all generated automatically by the operating system from our HTML code. And this is, I'm not asking anyone to think to this deep of a level, but this is how the machine is looking at our experiences. This is how the computer is actually breaking down our nice, beautiful user experiences. It's breaking it down this granular. And if we don't code and design with this in mind, we'll always have gaps in our design versus engineering and versus user experience. So we can take some steps in our design process to actually address those gaps. Currently on the slide, and I'm going to do my best to describe this quickly, is a prototype for my own blog that I'm working on. It's a simple mock-up that's all black and white. Up in the upper left-hand corner, you have the word starting blind as the largest text. Then you have the word in smaller text and italicized. And then you have some text objects. One for photography, one for blogging, one for contact, one for dev, one for speaking, and one for curating. And I know curating's misspelled. This was a prototype. And then below that list, there's blank space. To the right of that kind of column that took up 20% is a large rectangle with a black outline and the words Cory Joseph in large text at the top left of that rectangle, and then 3 paragraphs that say Hodor over and over and over. And then to the right of that text is a silhouetted picture that would probably represent a photograph. Below this rectangle is 5 groupings of objects in column layout with the word latest above them in large bold text as well. So there, in each one of these column groupings is a black square filled in to represent some form of a graphic and either some generic filler text or a quote that is still larger than the previous text that we saw under Cory Joseph, but not bold. And we have 5 of those repeating. So when we look at this could actually be sliced up into all of our different object types. Sure, okay, that list, there's a list of links. That starting blind is a link. The pictures are clearly photos. The text blocks are paragraphs. Then we can go a step further and start talking about, okay, what do we need to convey what are we trying to convey visually? Okay, so starting blind is the most important thing on the page. So let's make that a top level heading. I mentioned that group of links, that list of links. It's a list. So we need to define that as a list. And that's actually navigation for the page. So let's make sure that we tell the user in some way that that's navigation. That big group of text with Cory Joseph and the picture that'll probably be of me is a grouping of content, and it's its own consumable object. We can call it an article. Then we have the columns of grouped content, the square black boxes with text under them under latest. Latest itself is another heading. And then those black boxes are pictures again. And then the text under the black boxes, we can say, oh, yes, those are definitely links to articles. And we could actually group each of those columns, the picture and text as links, as one whole list item. And say, okay, this is a list of cards. And each card is the grouping of the black box and the text. We can also go one more step on the text and say, okay, yes, it's a link, and it's part of this list item object, but let's also make sure it's a heading since it's the title of an article. So this next slide that I have up is effectively a red line version of what I just described. We have the list region outlined and marked as a list. We have one of the objects inside of that list marked as a list item and a link. We have starting blind marked as a link and an H1, or heading level 1, to apply some semantic understanding to our visual structure. And then we have the different regions that I have already described. Another list group, a list region for that list of objects. And then inside of each one of those objects, we can see a box and a block of text is a list item, and so on and so forth. And this is what we should be striving for when we do prototypes and mock-ups, that this is our semantic structure. This is our semantic interaction. This is how we want the machine to interpret our design so that we can deliver a good user experience for everyone. And this looks a little overwhelming, but it actually all fits into kind of mental models that we've already established and build into our visual hierarchical design. But it's actually putting a name to all of it and saying, hey, if we're going to deliver a mock-up to engineers, we better make sure that we're explicit about the user experience for all users. All right. So I went over a few of the different kind of types of objects and regions that can exist. And depending on what platform and what device and operating system, is it a website, is it an app, you have some variability in this. But I have on the screen right now a list of the most common intersection of elements. Things like headings at different levels, things like lists, list items, labels, different region types, one for your main content. And if you notice on my previous prototype that I marked up, I didn't include a main region, and that's an error on my part. Header region where you would have your banner or your logo, navigation region or regions, depending on how many toolbars and navigation areas you use, etc. And like I said, this is just a sampling of probably about 120 different options that can exist depending on which software which platform and device you're actually designing for. All right, let's take another example. And this time I don't have a results slide that I can accidentally land on. This is a full width page, similar to the previous one. It's for kind of a blog page. There's a black bar at the top that contains large text that says XD. Everyone knows what tool I use now. Then 5 or 6 different pieces of text saying things like blog, search, etc. And then to the far right in that same black bar are some icons. A logo for Instagram, a logo for Facebook, a logo for Twitter, a globe logo, and an icon that looks like a person. Underneath that black bar is a large pale blue area with a block of text that says hero area, and then some generic lorem ipsum type text, no hodors here, across that light blue area, that light blue region. And below that light blue region is 2 blocks of text. Each one has a bold title above it, and then 2 lines of short text, and then another person icon with name, surname under those lines of text. And you can ignore the fact that there's a video camera icon in that blue box. Never do that. Never have a playing video on your landing page. That's just bad for everyone. It's just meant to be an image or light blue for this case. Think about it for a minute or discuss it with other folks at your table. How would you mark this up? What would we need to add? All right, now that we have a good murmur in the room, I'm going to stop you. So, me taking a look at this, I would say that upper black bar is our navigation region, and that inside of it, we would want to mark XD as an H1 for the title of the page. And then each one of those text items would be a list item in a list, and they would each be a link. And then I would also want to, that's it. They would be a list of list items that are links within our larger navigation region. Then off to the right, those icons all need a label, or alt text. They need to be made links, and we want to make sure that those are in a list as well. And we may even want to go a step further and name those lists so that people know what the purpose is of those lists that we're trying to convey by the grouping of them. Because for someone who's a screen reader user, we don't see that it's a large grouping until we start interacting with it. Then that main area of the content with the hero heading and the two groupings of text could be our main region. Each one of those headings on the groupings of text would be an H2. The text under it would be paragraph. And then we would probably have the author links, the first name, surname, be links to the author bios. And the icons actually don't serve any contextual purpose outside of saying this is the author byline. We can include an author tag or an author area label on, or extra label on the links to the author themselves and skip that graphic. And then the background media, depending on if it has contextual value, we would want to make sure to apply alt text or ignore it. All right, so now, same page, different kind of mock-up. We have two mobile views. One where our black bar is now replaced by a black bar with the text menu and a white outline at the top. And our same content as before, streamlined into one column. And then at the bottom is our 5 icons from before: Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, Glow, Person, in another black bar. To the right is another screenshot of that similar screen, but now it's all black. Instead of menu, it says close. And we have those icons at the bottom. And our 5 or 6 text items from the navigation list are here again. So in this experience, we could say, okay, yeah, navigation, links, and all that, that still applies. A lot of what we just went through actually applies to this. But what do we need to convey to users with regards to the fact that there's a menu opening and closing? Right? There's nothing in programming or development that automatically conveys to a user, hey, this is a menu and there's stuff in it, automatically. You know, our engineers need to do that. So we as designers need to make sure that our engineers are told, hey, this is a menu and it's in a collapsed state, and this is a menu and this is in an expanded state. And make sure to convey that through your engineering. All right, let's see. Kind of wrapping things up. And again, these slides are online. I'm not going to go through that long link again. I've included a list of a bunch of blogs and people that are great to follow. And then some books that I think are really fantastic, that I've definitely read every one of them. And then my contact info again. LinkedIn, Cory Joseph. Twitter, CoryJ206, or Cory.Joseph@Microsoft.com. That's it.